Azerbaijan's most committed ally, the Ottoman Empire, was itself in the process of being dismantled. To the south was a very hostile and agitated Iran, and given these historical conditions, the fall of the Republic looked inevitable. I don't think there was anything that the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic's leadership could have done to avoid the fall. The Soviet army was too strong to resist by an isolated Azerbaijan.
The fall of the Republic was not the end. The founding fathers continued their struggle for Azerbaijani freedom even from outside of the country.
The founding fathers, after the collapse, many of them were imprisoned and expelled. They moved to several European countries and most of them went to Turkey. They were well received by Turkey's triumphant national hero Atatürk. Rasulzade and some of his closest companions founded literary and political organizations, promulgated knowledge about Azeri heritage in Turkey and Europe. Periodically they also managed to smuggle in some anti-Soviet literature into the Soviet Azerbaijan. But the Soviet propaganda machine was so strong and the secret police functioned so effectively that the government in exile could make very little impact at home. In 1937, Stalin sentenced to death thousands of Azeri poets, pedagogues, writers, and other members of intelligentsia for having the democratic and the nationalist references in their works. So the intelligentsia was cleansed, and many members of the previous government, the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, faced persecution and violent death.
In 1953, on May 28th, the founding father of Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, Muhammad Amin Rasulzadeh, delivered his famous speech to the Azerbaijani nation. His speech was broadcasted on Voice of America from Washington.
Amerika'nın sesi radyosunun verdiği imkandan istifade ederek bugün Azerbaycan tarihinin en büyük günü olan 28 Mayıs'ta sizlere hitap ederim.
Dear fellow citizens of Azerbaijan, using this opportunity provided by the Voice of America radio station, I would like to address you today on May 28th, the most important day in Azerbaijan's history. After 100 years of Tsarist occupation, 35 years ago on this day, the Parliament of Azerbaijan declared its independence to the whole world. Till that time, Azerbaijanis had established themselves as a nation, but it was on that day that the people of Azerbaijan created a state. Using its long and rich history, on that day, Azerbaijan gained a significant political achievement. The most important Azerbaijani struggle for freedom during our history took place at the beginning of the 19th century against the Russian Empire. This struggle had lasted for more than 30 years and was full of acts of heroism. In 1904, Javad Khan's battle against the Russian Empire in Ganja city is the greatest example, which has since become a story of courage and bravery. Javad Khan's words, "We will die, but will not surrender," are the most important slogan inspiring Azerbaijanis across the world. By declaring its independence on May 28th of 1918, the Azerbaijani nation made its historic dream become a reality. During the very short time of its existence, the Azerbaijan national government was able to accomplish significant achievements. It was able to create a national army, something that was banned for centuries by the Russian Empire. But the Azerbaijan national government created an army of civil servants and trained public administrators. Social reforms were conducted. Legislative frameworks were created to provide land to farmers and protect the rights of laborers. Educational programs were launched to increase literacy. Azerbaijani Turkish was declared the state language. Universities and high schools were created. A Western European-style democratic parliamentary governance system was launched. Power was given to the parliament. Without gaining majority endorsement in parliament, no government was allowed to hold on to power. Juridical systems and the courts gained full independence. Azerbaijani towns and cities were flourishing. Those days, there was no incidence of terrorism against its own citizens, something that was prevalent under the Soviet rule. Doors to our motherland were open to the entire world, and Azerbaijani citizens were allowed to travel anywhere they wanted. Productive relationships and friendships were established with our neighbors in European countries. We had trade agreements with all nations of the world. As a result, the independence of Azerbaijan was officially recognized by the European countries and the United States of America. On January 12, 1920, the Azerbaijani nation celebrated the day of recognition of its sovereignty by the international community. This was a very important day in our history and the real celebration for our nation. On that day, the issue of Azerbaijan has become an international matter. We were no longer viewed as part of Russia by the international community. The reign of the Russian Empire in Azerbaijan, which had lasted more than 100 years, ended. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan was destined to face more challenges. The bloody Tsarist rule was replaced by the even bloodier Bolshevik regime. Our newly established freedom and independence was trampled by the Red Soviet invaders. Blood was shed, and our independent country ceased to exist. A month ago, on April 28th, the Soviet propaganda machine tried to convey this bloody invasion as the day of independence and freedom. The Soviet regime, nowadays portrayed as the most democratic establishment in Azerbaijan, in reality is the most brutal and hypocritical government system. If you had any opportunity to compare, you would have seen the real face of the Soviets. And if they were not scared of us, Azerbaijanis, they would have lifted the Iron Curtain and declared the freedom for all. They will never do that, because it will show who is right and who is wrong. Azerbaijan, along with the other countries in the Caucasus, was able to celebrate its real independence and freedom in May of 1918. 2 years later, in 1920, this freedom and independence was drowned in blood by the more advanced and superior Red Russian Army. Tens of thousands of our people became martyrs in this struggle, full of heroism and tragedy. 33 years later, today, the nations of the Caucasus are still struggling for their freedom by a variety of means. More and more people who once followed deceiving communist ideology now are joining the patriots to fight against this Soviet regime. It has been 8 years since the end of World War II, but the world cannot gain meaningful peace. The international community has by now started to understand the true face of the Soviet system. The world has already realized that the stronger the communist regime becomes, the harder it will be to achieve peace in the world.